constantly we have on every occasion we have these very large demonstrations, and there's a media blackout. What does a media blackout mean? I'll explain what it means. It means that when they'll make a demonstration against the Palestinian mission of 50 people to 100 people, and maybe even less, they'll have covered in all the television stations. They'll have it covered on all the newspapers. And yet, when we will go out, which we just, like I gave this last year, we went out with between 30 and 40,000 police estimate. We had more. And yet, the New York Times didn't mention it. The Post didn't mention it. The Daily News didn't mention it. None of them mentioned this. Why?
Truth. The Jews around the world knew and do know that the Arab people have always stood by us and the Muslim people. And let them know, again, as I say, that there are still hundreds of thousands of religious Jews, besides the Jews who have human rights. The Jewish people understand that this is godly rights of the Palestinian people, and that it's against the Torah. Not everybody is able to come up and stand up because the intimidation, the attacks of Zionism that is so strong physically and emotionally and in every other aspect, that they've attacked all our communities. When anybody stood up, they make them an example, as they did with Dar Yassin. The day they started with their setting up of the state, they knew right away how to use this insidious and these ploys of killing a few people in order to set an example for the masses. That's what they've done with the Jewish people. They've killed Dr. Dahan in the 1920s, one of the most respected and well-known ambassadors and representatives, distinguished people of the Jewish people, because he stood up and started revealing to the world that Jews and Zionism are two diametric opposites. So let the world know that there's hundreds of thousands of people who feel your suffering, suffer with you, just they cannot speak. And we have tens of thousands, and sometimes even over 100,000 comes out and demonstrates in Jerusalem, in New York. And invariably when we go out and demonstrate, people lose their jobs afterwards because they study with a microscope, with a magnifying glass, the Jews who went to the demonstration. If they have any type of power over the bosses of these people, they get them fired. Therefore, let them know there's many Jews who are in opposition to Zionism, and we feel your suffering. We should all pray fervently to the one who has the ultimate control of the world, to God, to bring about a speedy and peaceful dismantlement of the state. At the same time, we must do action. Get up, and I'm talking to my Jewish brethren, get up and speak, and don't be intimidated by the Zionists. Let us get up more often and constantly educate the world that they should not support the state. They should look at the truth. Who is the power in the world? God. We must stand up for what is right and help that the Palestinian people should be able to return to the sovereignty, rule over the entire Palestine, quick, speedily in our days, and ultimately we pray for the day when all humanity will recognize the one God, and we can all in harmony go and serve God in peace. Sooner than Amen. And our site is, of course, www.nkusa.org, and we have links there, www.nkusa.org, and we have links there of a lot of documentation and pictures of tens of thousands of Jews demonstrating around the world, of Jews being beaten and oppressed by the Zionists because they stand up against them in Jerusalem, in Bet Shemesh, and so forth, in Bnei Brak. And also many other links and different things that you can see, the documentation of the rabbinical authorities from day one against Zionism, and our constant demonstrations and actions that we're taking against the state of Israel. Thank you. Okay.
They don't know how strong and how really the Jewish community, especially the religious community, is in opposition to Zionism. If you would just, let's say, look at a picture of a demonstration, it says on 1993, a demonstration in Jerusalem. Thousands and thousands of people, thousands as far as your eye can see, tens of thousands, they have hundreds of thousands. And here you have in Bnei Brak a demonstration. Again, as far as your eye can see, demonstrating. It's all totally anti-Zionist over there in Bnei Brak. You have on every occasion, like this is a book we compiled that has demonstrations and letters and articles of the Jewish people standing in opposition to Zionism, documents. It is a tremendous. This is just a drop of what there is. Just one of many. We had actually a year ago. we had this large demonstration that the police gave us an estimate, I think, of 30 to 40,000. We had much more demonstrating against Zionism in New York. So the question is why you don't know about that. The answer to that is something which is called media blackout, which is basically that I've lived with personally. Here, this is in Madison Square Garden. I don't remember the date of this. You have a demonstration. We have in New York, like I say, constantly we have on every occasion we have these large, very large demonstrations, and there's a media blackout. What does a media blackout mean? I'll explain what it means. It means that when they'll make a demonstration against the Palestinian mission of 50 people to 100 people, and maybe even less, they'll have it covered in all the television stations. They'll have it covered on all the newspapers. And yet, when we will go out, which we just, like I gave this last year, we went out with between 30 and 40,000 police estimate. We had more. And yet, the New York Times didn't mention it. The Post didn't mention it. The Daily News didn't mention it. None of them mentioned this. Why? What is going on here? And don't think that they didn't know about it or they weren't there. We have many times long interviews, and yet it would never reach it would never reach the print. It's just mind-boggling. It just doesn't make. We can't understand the reason is because the Zionists have it down pat. They have the politicians they have under their hands with AIPAC. When a politician will try to show support or listen to what we have to say as representatives of Judaism, and that we do not want their support or whatever of the Zionist state or so forth, they'll know if they'll speak out, they will be destroying themselves or committing suicide politically because of AIPAC. The same thing they have with media control. They have a whole system of threatening, boycotting the newspapers, and they have people that watch. If there's they'll constantly complain that the papers are too one-sided for the Palestinian issue or something, and therefore they're very fearful, the papers, of printing anything that would be against the Zionist interest, because then they'll right away be attacked.